Captain Darius Greaves watched the alien ship materialize in the distance. Its sleek silver hull glistened under the strange light of the Taroxian system's twin suns. The first official encounter with the Taroxians was supposed to be a diplomatic mission, a chance for humans to learn about the most technologically advanced race in this region of space. Yet, as the two ships drew closer, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to go sideways. Inside the cramped cockpit of the Starbound, his crew was buzzing with anticipation. Lieutenant Vera Solis, the team's strategist, stood by his side, her eyes sharp as she analyzed the alien vessel on her monitor. "They're scanning us," she said calmly, but there was a hint of unease in her voice. "Let them look," Darius replied. He knew their ship wasn't much to marvel at. The Starbound was an old model, a relic of early human exploration days, but it was reliable, and right now, reliability was what they needed. More than that, he trusted his crew. They'd been through worse together. As the ships connected through the docking bay, the Taroxians greeted them with an air of superiority. Tall, sleek, and exuding confidence, their leader, Commander Xylor, stepped forward with a thin smile. His eyes quickly darted to the human crew's sidearms, solid black pistols that shot metal slugs. The commander sneered. Humans, still relying on primitive weapons. Xylor's voice was like a serpent's hiss. "You've come to the stars, but you bring toys." Darius clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. "We prefer something reliable," he said, motioning to his holstered firearm. "It may be old, but it gets the job done." Xylor chuckled softly, sharing a glance with his officers. "That's what makes your kind so amusing. You cling to the past, while we have evolved beyond such crude means." The tension between the two groups was palpable. Darius glanced at Lieutenant Solis, who gave him a slight nod. They had come prepared for diplomacy, but they were always ready for something more hostile. The Taroxians underestimated them, and it wasn't the first time humans had been judged by their surface appearance. As the conversation dragged on, something nagged at Darius. The Taroxians' arrogance seemed too deliberate, their posturing too pointed. Solis caught his eye again. She had noticed it too. "What do you say, Commander Xylor?" Darius asked, trying to keep the peace. "Shall we proceed with the negotiations?" Xylor waved a hand dismissively. "We have no interest in negotiations. Consider this a formality, human. Your kind will soon learn that the stars belong to the superior. Prepare your people for assimilation." At that moment, a warning alarm blared across the Starbound. The Taroxians had made their move. The alarm reverberated through the ship as Darius Greaves immediately reached for his sidearm. His heart pounded, but his mind was sharp. This was what they had trained for. The Taroxians' confidence had turned into a trap. Xylor's smug grin vanished as he gave a quick nod to his officers, who pulled out sleek energy weapons that hummed ominously. "Stand down, Captain," Xylor said, his voice icy and commanding. "Your primitive toys won't help you here." Darius leveled his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "We'll see about that." Lieutenant Solis had already begun assessing their situation, her eyes darting to the ship's schematics on her wrist display. "They're trying to disable our systems remotely," she said under her breath. "They want us defenseless." "Let them try," Darius replied, tightening his grip on his pistol. "We're not giving up without a fight." Xylor gestured to his guards, who advanced with weapons drawn, their glowing barrels aimed squarely at the humans. "Your kind never learns. Surrender, and I might be persuaded to show mercy." Darius moved quickly, faster than Xylor had anticipated. His pistol fired with a deafening crack, the sound of metal slug meeting alien armor echoing through the docking bay. One of the Taroxian guards staggered backward, his energy shield shimmering for a split second before failing. The round punched through, and the guard fell, a look of shock on his face as he crumpled to the ground. The other Taroxians recoiled in surprise, clearly not expecting the human weapons to have any effect. Darius smirked grimly. "You might want to update your shields." Xylor's eyes flashed with anger. "You dare?" He raised his energy blaster, but before he could fire, Lieutenant Sullis had already moved. Her small, compact firearm barked, sending another round straight into the barrel of Xyla's weapon, shattering it in his hand. Sparks flew, and the commander snarled in rage. "Fall back," Darius barked at his crew as they retreated into the narrow corridors of the Starbound. The Turuxians weren't far behind, but the humans knew their ship better, and they used every advantage they had. Darius and Sullis covered their retreat, their pistols firing off precise shots. The metallic ping of bullets ricocheting off walls mixed with the hiss of energy blasts. The Turuxians, though advanced, were clearly unprepared for the kind of guerrilla tactics the humans employed. They had expected an easy capture, but now they found themselves engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The energy shields they prided themselves on were powerful against energy weapons, but the sheer physical force of the human slug throwers overwhelmed them. Their technology was advanced, but it had a critical flaw: overcomplication. Darius and his crew moved swiftly, using every nook and cranny of the ship to their advantage. The Turuxians continued their assault, firing their bright, glowing shots down the corridors. But the humans adapted quickly. They used their knowledge of the ship's layout to flank the enemy, taking cover behind bulkheads and firing at opportune moments. Sullis ducked behind a stack of supply crates, her eyes scanning the battlefield. "Captain, they're trying to breach the engine room," she whispered urgently. Darius nodded. "We can't let them cripple the ship." He turned to his remaining crew members. "Tor, you and Lena hold the line here. Keep them occupied. Sullis, with me." The two sprinted down the narrow passageway, the sound of gunfire and energy blasts ringing in their ears. Darius had never been more thankful for the simple efficiency of human firearms. While the Turuxians' energy weapons needed time to recharge after each shot, his pistol could keep firing as long as there were bullets in the magazine. They reached the engine room just as a squad of Turuxians began cutting through the door. Sparks flew as their plasma torches melted the metal. Darius motioned for Sullis to flank them from the side while he prepared to engage directly. "They're not expecting resistance," Sullis whispered as she moved into position. "Let's give them a surprise." As the door to the engine room finally gave way, the Turuxians charged in, their weapons at the ready. But instead of an easy victory, they were met with the rapid-fire thunder of human bullets. Darius took down the first two with well-placed shots to their center mass, while Sullis picked off the others from her hidden vantage point. The Turuxians faltered, scrambling to find cover, but there was none to be had. The humans' superior positioning had turned the tide. Within moments, the squad lay incapacitated, groaning in defeat. Darius stood over them, his pistol smoking slightly as he holstered it. "You really thought we were just going to roll over and let you take us?" Commander Xylo appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with fury. "You can't win this, human. Our numbers are endless. Your little tricks are nothing compared to the might of the Turuxian Empire." Darius met his gaze, unflinching. "We don't need numbers, Xyla. We've got something far more dangerous." Xylo scoffed, but Darius stepped forward, his voice steady and full of confidence. "You see, we adapt. And when you underestimate us, it always comes back to bite you." Before Xylo could respond, the sound of a new alarm blared throughout the ship. The Turuxians had triggered a secondary defense system, one they hadn't accounted for. Darius smiled grimly. "Looks like our ship isn't as defenseless as you thought." The Turuxians, now aware of the humans' resilience, were becoming desperate. Commander Xyla's frustration was palpable as he barked orders into his communicator, calling for reinforcements. Darius Greaves watched the aliens' movements carefully, calculating their next move. The humans had managed to hold their own, but they were far from safe. Xyla had more troops at his disposal, and time was running out. Lieutenant Sullis moved beside Darius, her eyes still scanning the area. "They're regrouping, Captain. They'll hit us hard next time." Darius nodded, his jaw tight. "Let them come. We'll be ready." The starbound's corridors were quiet now, the calm before the storm. Darius motioned for his crew to gather. The small group huddled together in the narrow engine room, each one battered but determined. Tor and Lena, the other two crew members, were breathing hard from the earlier skirmish, their faces streaked with grime, but they were still standing. They had to be. "We've got a few minutes before they send in the next wave," Darius said, his voice low but steady. "Xyla thinks we're cornered, but we're going to make sure he regrets underestimating us." Solus smirked, knowing exactly where the captain was headed. "We're going to flip the trap, aren't we?" Darius smiled grimly. "Exactly. He's so sure of his tech and his superiority, he's blind to the simple things. That's where we've got the edge." The crew moved swiftly, each one knowing their role without needing further instruction. Tor began rewiring the ship's internal systems, setting up a controlled power surge that would overload key areas, but leave the humans' positions safe. Lena, their explosives expert, was busy placing makeshift traps in the most strategic points of the ship. The Turuxians wouldn't see it coming. "They're smart, but they're not used to thinking small," Darius explained as they worked. "They rely on big, showy tech. We use the simple stuff, the kind that gets overlooked." Solus was reading up a decoy signal that would draw the Turuxians to a different section of the ship. "And when they walk right into it," she added, "we'll have the real surprise waiting for them." As they set the stage for their counterattack, Darius couldn't help but feel a certain satisfaction. There was something deeply satisfying about turning the tables on an enemy so full of themselves. Humans had always been underestimated by the more technologically advanced species in the galaxy, and that had always been their greatest strength. Xyla's voice crackled over the ship's intercom, filled with arrogance and anger. "You think you can hide from me, human? There's nowhere for you to go. Surrender, and I might let you live long enough to serve in the Empire." Darius chuckled softly to himself. "The more they talk, the less they actually know," he muttered. Tor, finishing the last adjustments to the power grid, glanced up. "Ready, Captain. All systems are primed. Once they hit that corridor, they'll get a nice shock." "Good work," Darius replied. He turned to Solus. "Decoy." "Set," she answered with a grin. "They'll be chasing ghosts." Lena wiped her hands, satisfied with her handiwork. "Explosives are in place. They won't know what hit them." Darius took a deep breath and holstered his pistol. This was it. Everything was in place, and now it was just a matter of time. "All right, everyone," he said, his voice full of the confidence his crew had come to rely on. "Get to your positions, stay sharp, and remember, this is what we're good at." The crew dispersed, each taking up their assigned roles, hidden away in the ship's nooks and crannies. The plan was simple, but effective. Lure the Turuxians into a narrow section of the ship where their superior numbers would be useless, then disable their shields and overwhelm them with sheer ingenuity. Darius waited in silence, his ears straining to catch any sign of the enemy's approach. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last, until finally, the sound of clanking boots echoed through the ship's corridors. The Turuxians were coming. Commander Xylor led the charge, his energy weapon glowing brightly as he moved with confidence. Behind him, a dozen heavily armored Turuxian soldiers followed, their movements precise and disciplined. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. As they passed the first decoy signal, Solus triggered the distraction. A series of flashing lights and phantom readings appeared on the Turuxian scanners, causing momentary confusion. Xylor stopped, barking orders to his troops to recalibrate their systems. "Something's wrong," Xylor muttered, scanning the area with narrowed eyes. "This doesn't feel right." But it was too late. The trap had already been sprung. Tor activated the power surge, and a jolt of energy ripped through the corridor, sending several Turuxian soldiers sprawling as their energy shields flickered and died. Before they could react, Lena's explosives detonated, throwing debris and shrapnel in every direction. The Turuxians, caught off guard, scrambled for cover. Darius moved quickly, emerging from his hiding spot and firing his pistol with deadly precision. Each shot rang out with a metallic crack, and one by one, the Taroxians fell. Sardis flanked them from the opposite side, her own shots finding their marks. Xylor roared in frustration as his forces crumbled around him. His energy blaster fired wildly, but the humans were already a step ahead, using the chaos to their advantage. It wasn't long before the once confident Taroxians found themselves on the defensive, retreating from the humans' relentless assault. As the dust settled, Xylor stood alone, his soldiers either dead or incapacitated. He glared at Darius, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, human. Darius holstered his weapon, stepping forward with calm resolve. Oh, it's over, Xylor. You just didn't see it coming. Xylor snarled, but before he could make a move, Sardis had already leveled her gun at him. Don't even think about it. The Taroxian commander sneered, but didn't push his luck. He'd have been outplayed, and he knew it. Darius motioned for his crew to regroup, and they quickly secured the area. Good job, everyone, Darius said, his voice full of pride. But we're not done yet. We've still got to get off this ship. Solus nodded, and Xylor's not the type to let us go that easily. Darius smiled grimly. Then we'll just have to make sure he doesn't get the chance. The starbound's corridors felt eerily quiet in the aftermath of the ambush. Xylor, though defeated for now, was still a dangerous adversary. Darius Grease knew that if they didn't act quickly, the Taroxian commander would regroup and strike again, this time with an even greater force. He had no intention of letting that happen. Lieutenant Vera Solus was already several steps ahead. Captain, we need to disable their communications. If Xylor gets a message to his fleet, we'll have an armada on us before we know it. Darius nodded, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. You're right. We've got a window, but it's closing fast. Let's make sure it's slammed shut. Solus pulled up a schematic of the Taroxian ship on her wrist display, which they had downloaded earlier. Their comms center is here. She pointed to a section of the enemy vessel just beyond the docking bay. It's heavily guarded, but if we can get past their defenses and take it out, they'll be blind. Tor, still wiping debris from his uniform, stepped up. Captain, I can rig up an EMP blast to knock out their systems. It won't be permanent, but it'll buy us enough time to make a clean getaway. Do it, Darius ordered, his voice firm. Lena, cover Tor while he sets it up. We'll hold the line until the EMP's ready. The crew sprang into action once more, moving swiftly through the narrow corridors of their ship. Darius led the way, his senses on high alert. They had the advantage for the moment, but that could change in an instant. Xylor's ego had been bruised, and that made him more dangerous than ever. As they approached the docking bay, the tension mounted. Darius could hear the faint hum of Taroxian energy weapons charging, their alien voices barking commands in the distance. They knew the humans were coming, but they still hadn't learned the lesson. They didn't understand human adaptability. Ready, Captain? Solus asked, her voice steady as she adjusted the sights on her weapon. Darius gave her a tight nod. We hit them fast and hard, no mercy. With that, they breached the docking bay, and the battle erupted instantly. A squad of Taroxian soldiers opened fire, their energy blasts illuminating the room with brilliant flashes of blue and green. The humans, outnumbered but not outmatched, returned fire with brutal precision. The sharp cracks of their firearms echoed loudly, each shot striking with deadly accuracy. Darius moved with purpose, taking down one Taroxian after another, his body flowing through the chaos like a seasoned warrior. He had fought in enough battles to know that speed and efficiency were everything, and right now, the Taroxians were too slow to keep up. Tor and Lino worked in perfect synchronization, with Lena laying down suppressing fire as Tor rigged up the EMP device. The Taroxians, realizing they were being outmaneuvered, fell back to regroup. But the humans weren't about to give them any breathing room. Keep pushing, Darius shouted over the din of battle. We can't let them regroup. Solace, always the sharpest shot in the group, took down another Turuxian who had been trying to flank them. They're getting desperate, Captain. We need to press the advantage. Darius agreed. He could see it in their movements. The Turuxians were faltering. They had underestimated human resourcefulness, and now they were paying the price. But they were still dangerous, and Darius knew one wrong move could turn the tide. Suddenly, the Turuxian commander, Xylor, appeared at the far end of the docking bay, flanked by a new squad of elite soldiers. His eyes burned with fury, his earlier arrogance replaced by cold, calculated rage. Greaves. Xylor's voice boomed across the battlefield. This ends now. You and your primitive crew will pay for your insolence. Darius didn't flinch. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. Xylor raised his hand, and his elite soldiers charged forward, their energy shields flickering to life. These weren't the typical Turuxian grunts. They moved with lethal precision, their energy weapons firing in rapid succession. Lena, Tor, get that EMP ready now. Darius barked as he fired shot after shot at the advancing Turuxians. His bullets ricocheted off their shields, but he wasn't aiming to kill. He was buying time. Lena ducked behind a stack of crates, laying down cover fire. Almost there, Captain. Just need a few more seconds. But Xylor wasn't about to let them finish. He raised his blaster and aimed straight for Tor, his intent clear. Darius saw the danger and moved without thinking, rushing forward to shield his crew member. The blast hit Darius squarely in the chest, and he was thrown backward with a grunt of pain. His body slammed into the metal floor, and for a brief moment, the world blurred. But he fought through the pain, pushing himself to his feet as the sound of gunfire continued around him. Captain, Solace shouted, her voice filled with concern. She fired off several shots at Xylor, but the Turuxian commander's shield held firm. I'm fine, Darius growled, though his chest throbbed with pain. Just finish the job. Tor, his hands moving faster than ever, finished the EMP device and slammed it into place. It's ready. Lena hit the trigger, and the EMP pulse rippled through the docking bay with a loud hum. The effect was immediate. Xylor's elite soldiers staggered as their energy shields flickered and died. Their weapons powered down, leaving them momentarily defenseless. That's our opening, Darius shouted. The humans surged forward. Without their shields, the Turuxians were vulnerable, and Darius's crew didn't waste the opportunity. Solace took down 2 soldiers with precise shots, while Lena's grenades took care of the others. Darius moved in for the final blow. Xylor, realizing his mistake too late, raised his blaster again, but it was useless. His power was gone. Darius didn't give him the chance to fire. He rushed forward and struck Xylor across the jaw with the butt of his pistol, knocking the alien commander to the ground. Xylor glared up at him, his pride shattered. You will never win. Darius leveled his pistol at the commander, his eyes cold and determined. We already have. But instead of pulling the trigger, Darius lowered his weapon. I'm not going to kill you, Xylor. I want you to go back to your empire and tell them what happened here. Tell them what happens when you underestimate humans. Xylor's face twisted with rage, but he didn't argue. He knew he had been defeated, and there was nothing he could do about it. Darius stepped back, motioning for his crew to regroup. Let's move, Darius said. We're not sticking around for round 2. As the crew moved quickly to secure their escape, Darius cast one last glance at the defeated Turuxian commander. Xylor might have been powerful, but it was human ingenuity and adaptability that had won the day. The Starbound hummed to life as the crew boarded, leaving behind the smoking wreckage of the battle. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Darius leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile on his face. We may still be using metal slinging weapons, he murmured to himself, but it looks like they still work just fine. The hum of the Starbound's engines was a welcome sound, but Captain Darius Greaves knew they weren't out of the woods yet. As the ship accelerated away from the Taroxian vessel, every crew member's eyes were fixed on the scanners. Lieutenant Solis was monitoring the displays closely, and her brow furrowed in concern. "They're not pursuing us yet, but I don't trust it," Solis said, her voice tense. "They're up to something." Darius leaned over her shoulder, studying the data on the screen. The Taroxian ship remained stationary for now, but something didn't feel right. Xyla wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. "He's not going to let us walk away without a fight," Darius muttered. "He's planning something." Tor, who had been working furiously at the ship's console, glanced up. "I don't like the look of their power readings, Captain. They're charging something big." Lena, still bruised from the earlier skirmish, walked over with a grim expression. "I bet my last credit they're charging their main cannon. That thing could blow us out of space." Darius's jaw tightened. So Xyla's going all in. He couldn't help but admire the Taroxian commander's persistence, but it left them in a precarious situation. They didn't have the firepower to match the Taroxian ship's advanced weapons systems, especially if they were charging their main gun. Solis turned to Darius, her eyes steady but filled with urgency. "We can't outrun that thing. We need a plan." Darius nodded, his mind already racing through possibilities. The Starbound had held up so far, but they were low on ammunition, their shields were weakened, and Xyla's ship had superior range and firepower. A head-on fight would be suicide. "We need to get in close," Darius said, his voice calm despite the storm brewing around them. "Their long-range weapons won't do them much good if we're right under their nose." Tor's eyes widened. "You want to get close to that thing. It's got enough firepower to turn us into space dust." "That's the point," Darius replied, determination burning in his eyes. "They won't expect it. Xyla thinks he's got us cornered, but we're going to use his own arrogance against him. If we can get close enough to disable their main cannon, we'll have a fighting chance." Solis cracked a small smile. "It's crazy, but it's exactly what they won't see coming." Lena punched Tor lightly on the arm. "You up for some fancy flying?" Tor gave a nervous grin but nodded. "Let's hope I don't mess this up." The Starbound veered sharply, heading straight toward the Taroxian ship. Every member of the crew felt the weight of the decision. This was their last shot. If they failed, there would be no escape. But Darius knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. He trusted his crew, and he trusted their ability to think outside the box, something the Taroxians seemed incapable of doing. As the distance between the two ships closed, the tension in the air was electric. The Taroxian vessel was massive, dwarfing the Starbound in size and armament. But Darius wasn't intimidated. He had faced overwhelming odds before, and it was precisely in moments like these that humanity's true strength shone through. "Shields at maximum," Solis reported. "We're going to take some hits getting in close, but we can handle it." Tor's hands danced over the controls, his eyes focused and determined. Engaging evasive maneuvers. "Hold on, everyone." The Starbound jolted as the first barrage of energy blasts rained down on them. The ship's shields flickered but held steady. Darius gripped the edge of his console, keeping his balance as the ship rocked under the assault. "Keep it steady, Tor," Darius urged. "We're almost there." Lena kept her eyes on the weapons display, ready to fire the moment they were in range. Come on," she muttered under her breath, her fingers itching to pull the trigger. The Taroxian ship loomed closer and closer, its massive bulk casting a shadow over the Starbound. But they had done it. They were in position. Too close for the Taroxians' long-range weapons to be effective, and now the real fight could begin. "Now, Lena," Darius shouted. Lena didn't hesitate. The ship's cannons roared to life, unleashing a barrage of slugs directly into the Taroxian ship's hull. The impact was immediate, sending a ripple through the enemy vessel. Explosions blossomed along the Taroxian ship's surface, and their main cannon powered down, its charge interrupted. "They're scrambling," Solis reported, a hint of excitement in her voice. "We've got them off balance." Darius grinned. That's what we wanted. But the fight was far from over. Xyla's forces were still formidable, and they quickly recovered, launching a swarm of smaller fighter craft to engage the starbound. Darius cursed under his breath. They couldn't hold off a sustained attack like this for long. "They're coming at us from all sides," Tor warned, his voice tense. "I can't dodge them all." "Then don't try," Darius said, his voice full of steely resolve. "We're going to have to make this quick." He turned to Solis, his most trusted officer. "You know what to do." Solis nodded, understanding immediately. She had already started hacking into the Taroxian systems, her fingers flying over her console as she worked to disable their defenses from the inside. "Give me 30 seconds, Captain. I can overload their power grid." "We don't have 30 seconds, Darius replied, his eyes narrowing. "But we'll give you as much time as we can." The starbound shuddered as another wave of fighter craft descended on them, their energy weapons blazing. Tor fought to keep the ship steady, but the damage was starting to take its toll. Alarms blared, and the ship's shields were beginning to weaken. "We're running out of time," Lena shouted, firing another volley at the incoming fighters. Solis's hands moved faster. "Almost there. Just a little more." Darius gritted his teeth, watching the chaos unfold around him. They were hanging by a thread, but he trusted Solis. She always came through in the clutch. "Got it," Solis finally shouted, slamming her hand down on the console. The lights on the Taroxian ship flickered wildly as Solis's hack took effect. The enemy vessel's systems began to fail, their shields dropping and their power grid overloading. A series of explosions rocked the ship, and the fighter craft scattered in disarray. "We did it," Darius breathed, relief washing over him. But Xyla wasn't finished yet. The Taroxian commander appeared on the starbound's view screen, his face contorted in rage. "You may have crippled my ship, but you will never escape alive." Darius stared back at him, unflinching. "We'll see about that." With a final burst of energy, the starbound surged forward, escaping the Taroxian vessel's grasp. Xyla's ship was left burning in the distance, its systems in ruins, and its commander defeated. Darius exhaled slowly as the tension finally began to ease. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. "Good work, everyone," Darius said, his voice filled with pride. "But we're not celebrating just yet. We still got to get out of this system." Tor chuckled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "A walk in the park, right?" Lena grinned. "I'll take it over what we just went through." Solis leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to relax. "Captain, I think we just made history." Darius smiled, feeling the weight of their victory. "Maybe. But more importantly, we just showed them what humans are capable of." As the starbound jumped to hyperspace, the crew couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. They had faced overwhelming odds, but through their ingenuity, determination, and sheer willpower, they had come out on top. And as long as humans kept fighting, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The starbound drifted in the quiet of hyperspace, the hum of the engines steady and calming after the chaos of battle. Captain Darius Greaves sat in the cockpit, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His mind, however, was still racing with the events that had just unfolded. Lieutenant Solis walked up beside him, her footsteps barely audible. She leaned on the console, looking out into the void. "Hard to believe we made it out of that," she said softly, her voice tinged with relief. "Xyla won't forget this day." Darius nodded, his expression thoughtful. "No, he won't. We hit them where they least expected it. They'll think twice before underestimating humans again." Solis gave a small smile. There's something satisfying about that. There was a silence between them, not the awkward kind, but the kind that comes after shared hardship. They had survived a battle that should have been unwinnable, outsmarting a superior enemy with tactics born of creativity and grit. The rest of the crew filtered in, drawn by the calm after the storm. Tor sat down at his station, still running diagnostics on the ship, while Lena checked her gear, making sure everything was in order. "Any signs of pursuit?" Darius asked, his voice calm but alert. Tor shook his head. "Nothing on the scanners. Xyla's ship is crippled, and I doubt they have the resources to track us right now. We've got a clean break." Lena smirked, leaning back in her seat. "I still can't believe we got out of there. That was one hell of a gamble, Captain." Darius chuckled, the tension finally loosening in his chest. Sometimes it's the only way. When you're outgunned and outnumbered, you've got to play the cards you've got and make the best of them. Solace's smile widened as she glanced at him. "And humans are good at that. We're always adapting, always finding a way." Darius nodded slowly. "That's what Xyla and the rest of his kind don't understand. They think technology and power make them superior, but they lack imagination. They rely on things being predictable." Lena joined in, her voice filled with pride. "But we're unpredictable. That's why they can't beat us, no matter how many times they try." As the crew reflected on the battle, there was a sense of shared victory, not just over the Turuxians, but over the very idea that humans were somehow less because they used primitive technology. The old suck throwers, the tactics, the improvisation, it all reminded them of something fundamental about their species. Humanity had always thrived under pressure, and it was that very resilience that made them a force to be reckoned with. The ship's console beat softly, and Solace glanced at it before turning back to Darius. "We're approaching safe territory. No signs of trouble." Darius exhaled, finally allowing himself to relax fully. "Good. Let's keep it that way for a while." Tor grinned. "Not that I'm complaining, Captain, but what's next? We going to keep stirring up trouble, or are we finally going to get a little R&R? Darius smiled, leaning back in his chair. "We've earned a break, that's for sure, but we can't stay still for long. Xyla and his empire won't forget us. They'll come looking sooner or later." Lena shrugged. "Let them come. We'll be ready." The crew shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes after surviving something that could have gone very wrong. But even as they joked, Darius knew the truth. Their fight with Xyla was just the beginning. Word would spread of what had happened, and the Turuxians wouldn't be the only ones paying attention. The humans had made their mark in the stars, and the galaxy was starting to take notice. As the starbound sailed through hyperspace, Darius felt a sense of calm wash over him. They had faced overwhelming odds and come out stronger. But more importantly, they had shown the universe that humanity wasn't something to be dismissed. Their weapons might be old-fashioned, their ships outdated, but what they lacked in technology, they made up for with heart, courage, and adaptability. "Captain," Solace said after a moment, her voice thoughtful. "Do you ever think about what we're doing out here? I mean, really think about it. We're representing all of humanity out in the stars. Every time we win a battle, every time we survive, we're showing them who we are." Darius looked at her, seeing the quiet pride in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think about it. And that's why we keep going. Not for the glory or the thrill of it, but because we're building something out here. We're carving out a place for humanity among the stars." Solace smiled. "It's a good thing we've got you leading us, then." Darius shrugged, a small grin on his face. "I just do what I can, same as everyone else." The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibilities. They had faced impossible odds and triumphed, not because of their technology, but because of who they were. Humans. Resourceful, resilient, unstoppable. "Take us to the nearest port," Darius said, his voice steady. "We'll rest, refuel, and see what the galaxy throws at us next." The crew went back to their stations, the atmosphere lighter now that the danger had passed. But there was a shared understanding among them. They would be ready for whatever came next. Humanity had a way of rising to the occasion, and no matter what challenges awaited them, Darius knew they would continue to survive, to thrive, and to push forward. As the ship sped onward, Captain Darius Greaves allowed himself one final thought. Humans were far more than anyone in the galaxy had ever imagined, and that, he knew, would be their greatest weapon.